Sing, goddess of the rage of Achilles, son of Peleus. The opening words of Homer's Iliad name its greatest hero and the emotion that drives the story, his rage. Homer's story matters because the Iliad really is the Bible of heroism. For instance, Alexander the Great slept with the Iliad under his pillow every night. And if you want to know the true nature of heroism, there is no better place to look than in the epic verse of the Iliad, composed in the 8th century BC. And the devastating anger that brought countless sorrows upon the Achaeans and sent many valiant souls to Hades, leaving their bodies as the prey of dogs and birds. So why was Achilles the greatest hero of them all? I'll give you a clue. It's not because of his superhuman powers. It's because of another quality that he only finds within himself after going through enormous personal pain. The start of the Iliad plunges us right into the middle of a bitter quarrel between Achilles and the leader of the Greek army, King Agamemnon. Agamemnon had a captive girl, Chryseis. Her father, a Trojan priest of Apollo, turned up at the Greek camp and pleaded for the return of his beloved daughter. Instead of treating him with honour, Agamemnon sent the old priest away and warned him never to show his face again around the Greek camp or alongside their dark ships, or else. Humiliated, the priest prayed for revenge, calling upon his god Apollo, whose arrows were tipped with plague. The god heard his prayer and came down, furious, from the summits of Olympus, with his bow and his quiver upon his shoulder, and the arrows rattled on his back with the rage that trembled within him. He sat himself down away from the ships, with a face as dark as night, and his silver bow rang death. Agamemnon had no choice. He had to return the girl. But there was a twist. He seized Achilles' captive girl in place of his own. And so began the wrath of Achilles, a fury so fierce that he refused to fight at all. Instead, he brooded in his tent or sat on the beach, staring out to sea. You might say the mighty Achilles appears petty and mentally fragile, displaying that most unheroic of traits, passive aggression. Now the Trojans were winning the war, sending countless souls of the brave Greek warriors down to Hades. And this is precisely what our sulky hero hoped for. This is no grand heroism, but the petty revenge of a wounded ego. A delegation of Greek heroes, Ajax, Odysseus, and the charioteer Phoenix, arrived at Achilles' tent with desperate pleas. Odysseus offered Achilles worldly goods, but Achilles rejected that, saying that a hero and a coward receive the same reward in the end, death. Now Phoenix was like a father figure to Achilles, and he told stories implying that Achilles should seize the moment and win his everlasting glory. But Achilles gave a reply that was at best ambiguous. My mother Thetis, who is immortal, has told me there are two possible fates for me. If I stay here and fight, I won't return home safely, but I shall gain everlasting glory. If I go back to my homeland, I'll lose that glory, but I shall live a long life, and death won't come for me any time soon. So had Achilles really rejected heroism and given up his ambition of everlasting fame? Or was he just bluffing? You see, Achilles is a complex character. He's profound, emotional, and changeable. Briseis, the captive Trojan girl, is not the only love of his life. He has another, Patroclus, a man with whom he shares a bond deeper and more intense than any other. Perhaps they were lovers. They were certainly brothers in war, a relationship forged in the fires of battle. Patroclus was distressed by the Greeks' losses. He came to Achilles in an emotional state, and the Greek hero showed his sensitive side. "Why tears, Patroclus? Like a girl, a baby running after her mother, begging to be picked up as she tugs her skirts, holding her back as she tries to hurry off, all tears, fawning up at her till she takes her in her arms. That's how you look, Patroclus, streaming hot tears." This was the plan of Patroclus. He understood Achilles had his reasons for not fighting. But he wanted to put on Achilles' armour himself and inspire the Greeks and intimidate the Trojans. At length Achilles agreed, but only most reluctantly and with strict instructions. Drive the Trojans back, but do not pursue them to the walls of Troy. As vultures with crooked talons and hooked beaks rip into one another on some high crag, struggling, screaming, as their talons close on each other, beak to beak, claw to claw, so the Greeks and the Trojans leapt at each other, hacking with sword and spear, double-edged. Caught up in the passion of war, Patroclus forgot Achilles' warning and pressed the attack all the way to the gates of Troy. There he encountered Hector, the Trojan prince and greatest warrior. A battle ensued, and Hector struck Patroclus down with his spear near the walls of Troy, leaving the Greeks and the Trojans to fight fiercely over his fallen body. When Achilles heard of his fallen comrade's fate, his grief was immense, and here we see another crack in the illusion of heroism. The greatest hero of all is now a man devastated by loss. Of all that breathe and crawl across the earth, there is nothing alive more suffering than man. And then Achilles rejoined the battle, like a fire blazing in some mountain glen after a long drought, its ravenous flames leaping from rock to rock, trees crackling, stoked by the gale. So Achilles swept across the plain, his bronze chest bright as the thunder gods, and his spears felled Trojans in droves. Achilles was not really in control. His rage had taken control over him. He chased Hector around Troy's city walls, and after a brutal duel, he killed him. But even this did not quench his thirst for revenge. Achilles, once a symbol of honor, pride, and glory, now dragged his rival's body behind his chariot for days, blinded by grief and rage. Surely this was not heroism. Could there be any coming back for Achilles? At the dead of night, Priam, the aged king of Troy and Hector's father, approached Achilles in his tent. He clasped Achilles' knees and kissed those terrible, man-slaying hands that had killed so many of his sons. And unlike King Agamemnon, who sent an old man away, Achilles recognized his common humanity with King Priam and returned the body of his son. And this is why Achilles is the greatest hero of all, not because he is invincible, but because he is vulnerable and shows compassion. But wait, there's still one more question. Do heroes exist at all? Simone Weil, in her influential essay The Iliad, or the Poem of Force, argues that the true hero, the true subject, the centre of the Iliad is force. Weil was writing in 1940 during the early stages of World War II, in a world torn apart by violence and suffering. She elaborates, "The man who is possessed by force is no longer free. He is the slave of destiny that impels him as much as it impels his enemies towards a ruin that he cannot escape." Of course, courage is magnificent, but ideals and the pursuit of honour can open us up to manipulation. Politicians and the media still use the rhetoric of heroism to persuade soldiers to fight and lay down their lives for, well, usually for the politicians. Just like that delegation of heroes came to Achilles and tried to persuade him to return to the fight and lose his life for Agamemnon. Perhaps, like Achilles, we should question the whole nature of heroism and whether the pursuit of glory and honour is just an illusion. Because in fact, all that war usually brings is countless sorrows. And I think that is the true message of the Iliad. And this has been my first video for Ancient Stories. I plan to do many more, so please subscribe and check out this playlist.